Have you ever noticed that strange, suffocating feeling when you need something to happen? Like you wake up, and before your feet even hit the floor, your chest already feels tight. That deadline is looming. That person still hasn't texted you back. That conversation you've been rehearsing in your mind for days now just won't land, no matter how many angles you try. And somewhere in the back of your mind, something starts to whisper. Why isn't this working? It's like life turns into this silent opponent. You're pushing, pulling, begging it to respond. But it just sits there, arms crossed like a stubborn cat, refusing to move, refusing to care. The more you try to control it, the more it slips away. And maybe without even realizing it, you start believing that if you're not gripping tightly, then you're doing something wrong. But what if that belief is the very thing keeping you stuck? We've all been there, trying to hold on to something so tightly that we actually destroy it. A relationship that we thought we could save if we just tried harder. A dream we pushed so relentlessly that we lost the joy of it along the way. A conversation we forced only to watch it die under the weight of our expectations. The pressure we apply, thinking it's helping, becomes the thing that breaks everything we're trying to protect. It's like holding water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it escapes. I remember watching someone I love spiral through this once. She had just graduated top of her class, full of ambition and plans. She applied to dozens of jobs, rehearsed every interview, tracked every response like her life depended on it. And every rejection hit her like a punch to the chest. The more desperate she became, the more she overcompensated longer cover letters, more calls, more tension in her voice, more apologizing for things she didn't need to be sorry for. It was like watching someone drown while trying to swim harder. Then one day, she stopped. Not because she gave up, but because she let go. She took a break, went to visit her grandma in the countryside for a week. She painted, read books, walked barefoot in the garden. And I remember her calling me a few days, and her voice sounded different, lighter. And just like that, her phone rang. It was a company she'd applied to months ago. They said they had an opening, and they remembered her. She got the job. No extra effort, no desperation, just timing, just space, just ease. That moment never left me. Because it taught me something I wasn't ready to admit until much later. Sometimes, when life isn't moving, it's not because you're not trying hard enough. It's because you're trying too hard. We've all been trained to believe that if we're not pushing, then we're failing. That urgency equals importance. That clinging means caring. But it's not true. That feeling of frantic energy, it's not power. It's fear disguised as productivity. And fear is loud. It chokes the air in the room. It infects your words, your choices, your tone, your posture. And people feel it. Opportunities feel it. Even your own creativity shrinks under its weight. There's something different about people who move through life with that calm, grounded energy, like they know something the rest of us haven't figured out yet. They're not constantly chasing, not obsessing, not scrambling to fill the silence. And yet things come to them. They glide through what others fight against. It's not luck. It's not magic. It's alignment. See, life is a rhythm. And when you're out of sync with it, you can work twice as hard and still go nowhere. But when you're in tune, when you've stopped gripping and started flowing, the whole world shifts with you. Doors open. People soften. Ideas land. And here's the hard part. It usually starts with surrender. Not the kind of surrender that says, I don't care anymore, but the kind that says, I trust this now. I trust that I've done my part, and I'm going to stop strangling the outcome. That kind of surrender takes more courage than control ever did. Let me tell you another story, one that might feel UNC. There was a man I used to know who wanted love more than anything. Every first date felt like an audition. Every message left unread would send him spiraling. He wasn't needy, not in the way people typically use that word, but everything he did came from a place of trying to secure something that would finally make him feel like enough, and he kept getting ghosted until he stopped dating altogether. Not out of bitterness, but exhaustion. He started focusing on other things, volunteering hiking journaling. He still wanted love, but he no longer needed it to validate him. And wouldn't you know it, that's when she showed up. Not through an app, not through effort, but through ease. They met at a local reading group. No fireworks, no rehearsed lines, just conversation, just presence. They're married now. I remember asking him what changed, and he just smiled and said, I stopped trying to make it happen. I just let it happen. That sentence stayed with me because it sounded so simple, and yet it carried all the weight of years spent forcing. Sometimes the deepest healing happens not when you achieve something, but when you finally release your grip on needing to achieve it. When you stop performing, when you stop pushing, when you simply sit with what is and let life breathe again. You don't have to force your way forward. You don't have to wrestle every answer to the ground. You don't have to fill every silence with words, every gap with plans, every ache with solutions. Sometimes, you just have to stop getting in your own way. And I promise, when you do, life will begin to move again. Not always in the direction you expected, but in the direction you actually need. There's something deeply humbling about realizing that all the energy you've been spending trying to fix your life might have been the very thing blocking it from unfolding. Like discovering you've been yelling at a flower to bloom faster, not realizing it only grows in silence, in stillness, in its own time. We've been raised in a world that rewards the loudest effort, that glorifies the grind, that teaches us to chase to conquer, to hustle our way into worthiness. But the soul doesn't respond to pressure like that, and neither does life. What your heart truly longs for, peace, connection, clarity, it cannot be forced into existence. It must be received. And receiving doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less, from softening, from letting go of the belief that your value depends on how hard you try. It's strange, isn't it? How we can carry this invisible weight on our backs for years, not even realizing it's there. The weight of always needing to prove something. The weight of being a good person, a hard worker, someone who's doing their best, as if the universe is keeping score, as if you'll finally be rewarded once you've suffered enough. But life doesn't work like a vending machine. You don't put in struggle and get out blessings. What really shifts things is when you stop pushing from lack and start acting from trust. It's a quieter kind of movement, a deeper one, the kind that says, I don't know exactly how this will unfold, but I'm still showing up with an open heart. You see this in people who've lived through their own unraveling. There's a softness in their eyes, a gentleness in their words. They're not trying to prove anymore. They've already been broken open. And they've learned that what survives the breaking is more real than anything they were chasing before. They don't need to shout to be heard. They don't need to force conversations to feel seen. And somehow, life leans in closer to them because their energy is different. It's magnetic, not manipulative, rooted, not reactive. And that's what this is really about, the energy behind your actions. You can do the exact same thing. Make a call, start a project, pursue a dream. But if your energy is clenched with fear, it'll land differently than if your energy is open, relaxed, trusting. Have you ever talked to someone who needed you to like them, who was saying all the right things, but something about it felt tight off, exhausting? Now compare that to someone who shows up with nothing to prove, who's just themselves, who listens, who doesn't push for approval. Don't you feel safer with that person? Don't you find yourself wanting to lean in? Life feels the same way. It's not just the action, it's the energy. And when your energy is wrapped in desperation, even your best efforts can fall flat. But when it's rooted in peace, in trust and enoughness, things start moving again. Not always fast, not always flashy, but real. You don't need to force your way into the room when you're already at peace with who you are outside the door. Let's talk about something that's hard to admit. Most of us are addicted to the struggle. Not because we want to suffer, but because we've been taught that suffering means we're making progress. That if something comes easily, it must not be worth it. So when life feels hard, we assume that must mean we're on the right track. We keep pushing, grinding, tensing, thinking, if I just try harder, it'll finally work. But ease isn't laziness, and flow isn't failure. Think of a dancer. The beauty of the movement doesn't come from how tightly they control each muscle. It comes from trust. Trust in their body. Trust in the rhythm. Trust in the moment. Now think about your own life. Where have you been gripping so tightly that nothing can breathe? Where have you been trying to choreograph every step, every conversation, every outcome? What would happen if you loosened your hold, if you allowed life to surprise you? That doesn't mean you stop showing up. It just means you stop dragging the weight of needing it to work out exactly the way you pictured every time. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning how to care deeply without clinging, to want something without needing it to define you, to move toward your desires while knowing you'll still be whole even if they don't arrive on schedule. There's real power in that space. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't need applause to feel valid. The kind that doesn't demand, doesn't control, but still carries weight. And this kind of power, it draws things to you. People, peace, purpose. Not because you chased them down, but because you created the space where they could land. Let me say this another way. The things that are truly meant for you will never require you to twist yourself out of shape to keep them. They'll never require you to abandon your peace, your values, your center. They may challenge you, they may stretch you, but they will never suffocate you. So if something feels like it's constantly slipping through your fingers, maybe it's not yours to grip. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's just not meant to be held that way. When you stop forcing, you make room for grace. When you stop chasing, you start receiving. When you stop gripping, your hands are finally open enough to hold what's real. You are allowed to move slower. You are allowed to release control. You are allowed to be gentle with yourself, even when the world tells you that gentleness is weakness. Because the truth is, gentleness is strength that no longer needs to scream. And the more you live from that space, the more you'll see that life doesn't need to be pushed. It needs to be met with presence, with trust, and with the quiet confidence that says, I don't need to force this. I'm already enough. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that lives in people who are always trying to hold everything together. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, but the kind that seeps into your bones after years of micromanaging your own existence. The kind that comes from being in a constant battle with the unknown, from always asking yourself, what else do I have to do? Why isn't this working? What am I doing wrong? That's the weight no one sees. The invisible effort behind every smile. The silent panic behind every plan. The urge to fix things before they even break. To predict pain before it arrives. To prevent disappointment before it even has a chance to breathe. And here's the truth. You were never meant to carry all of that. You were never supposed to play puppet master to life. You were never designed to live in a state of permanent urgency. That was something you learned. Maybe early. Maybe from survival. Maybe from the way the world rewarded you every time you overextended yourself and punished you when you paused. But what if you don't need to live like that anymore? What if you can let go without losing yourself? We're so conditioned to believe that relaxing is dangerous, that letting go means falling behind, that surrender is some kind of spiritual laziness. But the more we chase life from that place of fear, the more it runs. Because control is rooted in fear, and fear is always grasping, always tightening, always protecting. But you can't receive when your hands are clenched. You can't hear the truth when your mind is screaming. You can't connect with others when your energy is filled with resistance. There's an entirely different life waiting on the other side of letting go. One where you don't have to manipulate outcomes to feel safe. One where you can still care deeply, but without clinging. Where you can still show up fully, but without overextending. It starts when you stop making everything about you. When you stop interpreting every delay as a failure. When you stop assuming silence means rejection, or distance means punishment. Sometimes people are just busy. Sometimes timing isn't right. Sometimes you're not being ignored. You're being protected from something that would have broken your spirit. You don't have to force people to stay. You don't have to chase opportunities that run. You don't have to grip love so tightly that it can't breathe anymore. When something is truly meant for you, it won't require you to abandon your peace to keep it. And when it's not meant for you, all the begging, all the fixing, all the emotional acrobatics in the world won't make it stay. Let that truth soften something inside you. It's okay to be tired of fighting for things that don't fit. It's okay to stop trying to be someone else's idea of worthy. It's okay to stop proving fixing reaching, because your worth has never been up for debate. Not by your results, not by your timeline, not by how well you perform your pain. And here's something else no one tells you. Peace isn't found in the outcome. It's found in how you move toward it. You can win the game and still feel empty if the journey there drained your soul. So ask yourself, what are you building your life on? Is it fear? Is it control? Is it desperation disguised as discipline? Or is it trust? Is it alignment? Is it the quiet knowing that you don't have to become someone else to be loved, respected, or successful? The world has enough people performing their lives. What it needs more of are people who have the courage to pause, to breathe, to move from intention instead of insecurity, to let things come and let things go without making either mean something about their worth. This doesn't mean you won't care. It means you'll stop confusing care with control. You'll stop draining your energy trying to predict and perfect every corner of your life. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing, not out of passivity, but out of presence. You let the email wait. You sit in the silence. You feel the discomfort without trying to fix it. You let the thought pass without following it down a spiral. You allow things to unfold. You begin to trust that life will meet you where you are not, because you demand it to, but because you finally created space for it. This is the paradox of letting go. When you stop chasing, life stops running. When you stop begging, you start receiving. When you stop trying to prove your worth, people see it more clearly. You don't need to grip so tightly anymore. You don't need to make it happen overnight. You don't need to force what's resisting you, especially if that resistance is your soul's way of saying, "Not this way." You're allowed to pivot. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to admit that the way you've been doing things is no longer working. And not because you're broken, but because you're waking up. You're realizing that your peace matters more than appearances. That your alignment is more valuable than your achievement. That the real magic happens not when you grip harder, but when you finally let life breathe again. So, take a breath, loosen your grip, and just be here, not 10 steps ahead, not trying to fix, not trying to predict, just here, right now, alive, enough, already becoming everything you're meant to be without forcing a thing. Sometimes we forget that the most important things in life were never born from force. You didn't force your first breath. You didn't schedule the moment your heart first began to beat. You didn't control the way the sun rose this morning, or the way the trees knew when to bloom. And yet, it all happened. There's something holy about that, something sacred, in realizing that life moves on its own. And the more you trust that rhythm, the more it begins to trust you back. But when you're caught in the trap of control, it's hard to see that. You start believing that you are the glue holding everything together. That if you rest, things will fall apart. That if you don't push, nothing will move. But life isn't asking you to break yourself to prove you're worthy of its blessings. It's asking you to soften, to slow down, to stop treating your desires like emergencies. You don't have to panic your way into peace. You don't have to demand your way into joy. You don't have to exhaust yourself just to earn what already belongs to you. And maybe that's the lesson life has been quietly offering you all along. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just being invited to stop chasing and start allowing. There is nothing wrong with wanting more, with dreaming bigger, with hoping for something beautiful to enter your life. But the moment that desire becomes an obsession, the moment your identity becomes tied to the outcome, that's when you begin to lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, you lose the one thing that life was trying to work through. You, the real you. The one who is calm beneath the noise. The one who doesn't need to impress or prove or explain. The one who simply is. That's where your power lives, not in effort, but in essence. You don't have to fight to be chosen. You don't have to script the conversation to be heard. You don't have to mold yourself to fit someone else's expectations. You can simply return to yourself and trust that anything that belongs in your life will recognize you when you're no longer hiding. That's the difference between force and flow. Force says I have to chase it or I'll lose it. Flow says if it's for me, I can't miss it. Force says, if I stop trying, everything will fall apart. Flow says if I stop trying, what's not meant for me will fall away, and what is meant for me will find its way in. So, here's the invitation. Instead of gripping harder, open. Instead of controlling, allow. Instead of striving, listen, because the guidance you're searching for, the next step, the clarity, The peace, it doesn't live in your panic. It lives in your stillness. You don't have to do more to be ready. You don't have to fix everything to be worthy. You don't have to force yourself into timelines that were never meant for your soul. You just have to be where your feet are, feel what you're feeling, and allow the moment to be enough. That's not giving up. That's coming home. And when you come home to yourself, life meets you there. It meets you in the pauses you used to rush through, in the quiet moments you used to overlook, in the beauty you used to walk past on the way to something you thought mattered more. That's what flow feels like. Not passive, not careless, not disengaged, but alive, attuned, open. So if you're tired, it's okay. If you're uncertain, it's okay. If you're afraid to stop trying, that's okay too. But you don't have to be afraid of what will happen if you let go. Be more curious about what might finally arrive, because you did. That project, it will come together with more ease when you stop forcing perfection. That relationship, it will deepen when you stop needing it to complete you. That clarity, it will rise to the surface when you stop drowning in it with overthinking. Because everything you're chasing is already moving toward you. It just needs you to stop getting in the way. You're allowed to step back without losing momentum. You're allowed to exhale without everything falling apart. You're allowed to trust that life, even when messy, is wiser than your anxiety wants you to believe. And here's the truth that will always set you free. You were never supposed to control everything. You were meant to trust, to act when it's time to act, to pause when it's time to breathe, and to release when it's time to let go. Let that be enough. Let you be enough. Not when things work out, not when someone validates you, but right now, in this breath, in this stillness, because this is where life finds you. Not in the forcing, but in the flowing. Not in the grasping, but in the surrender. Not in the proving, but in the quiet, knowing that you don't have to become anything more to be everything you already are. You are allowed to let go